So the preliminary report on the crash of Air India Flight 171 has now come out, and it's stunning because it leaves us with more questions than answers. We actually have more questions now than before this report came out. And let me take you through what has happened. Now, this is a 15-page report released by the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, and this is the preliminary report, which means the investigation continues, but it's available on the internet if you want to look at it, and we've put a link also in the description of this video. It was released early this morning, and it tells us a few things, but many critical questions are now unanswered. Let me take you through exactly the operative part that has actually come out from this 15-page report. According to the report, both switches that feed fuel into the two engines of the Air India Flight 171 were cut off. What was followed was, it was followed by some confusion in the cockpit between the two pilots immediately after takeoff when the plane crashed. The report said that one pilot asked the other, "Why did you shut off the fuel?" and the other one responded that he didn't do it. He said, "I didn't do it." According to the probe report, both engines to the aircraft shut down mid-air, and the flight crashed 32 seconds after takeoff. The report has also ruled out any sort of bird hit or bird activity that could have impacted the flight in any way. Now, the two pilots in question, the captain Sumit Sabharwal and first officer Clive Kundar, we know that they had tremendous experience. The captain had more than 15,000 hours of flying experience. The first officer had more than 3,000 hours of flying experience. We understand from this report also that they were sufficiently rested, that they had passed all checks, and they were safe to fly. Now, the key events, according to the investigation, this was the sequence. At the time that the aircraft took off, the co-pilot was flying the plane, the captain was monitoring. The report said, and I'm quoting, the aircraft achieved a maximum recorded speed of 180 knots, and immediately thereafter, engine 1 and engine 2 fuel cutoff switches transitioned from run to cutoff position one after the other with a time gap of 1 second. So basically, both of the fuel got cut off for both engines at the same time. As per the report, engine 1 and 2 began to decrease their takeoff values as the fuel got cut off. The cockpit voice recording said one of the pilots was heard asking, "Why did you cut it off?" The other pilot responded saying, "I did not do so." The aircraft, then the pilots transmitted "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday." The air traffic control inquired about that call sign but did not get any response, and then next thing observed the aircraft crashing outside the airport boundary, activated emergency response. Now, the report has also said that few samples were taken, they were tested because there was some confusion. The questions also, was the fuel contaminated? Could there have been a problem with the fuel? It seems now that the fuel was okay, there was no problem with the fuel. It also says effectively that there was no problem with the aircraft at all. This is the effective issue. What triggered the dual engine shutdown? Now, the fact that, and most of the aviation experts who've commented about this morning have said that there's a picture of what these buttons look like, or what these levers look like. Apparently, they are spring levers. So to move the fuel buttons from run to cut off, you actually have to grab them with your entire hands, pull them, move them out of position, and then release them. And again, to move it to cut off, they have to be grabbed, they have to be pulled out of their position, moved, and then released back into their position. So, plus there are measures within this aircraft to make sure that you cannot knock it shut, or it cannot in any accident be switched on or switched off like you would do a light switch. There are measures to be taken to make sure that that never happens. So the question then arises is, why did the fuel get shut off for both engines at the same time? Could the pilots have done it? Now, if you take it prima facie based on the conversation recorded from the cockpit, with one pilot is saying, "Why did you do it?" Obviously, then pilot number 1 has not done it himself. And the second pilot says, "No, I didn't do it," which means pilot number 2 has not done it either. Then how did this happen? Now, according to aviation experts, for both engines to have failed at the same time in a commercial aircraft, the chances are 1:1,000,000. Because if one engine had failed, the pilots could have successfully continued and achieved takeoff with one engine, and they would normally achieve a height of about about 800 meters, and then apparently start checking the engine, 800 feet, I beg your pardon, and then start checking the engine that had failed. But in this case, it seems that before takeoff had actually completed, the fuel got cut off to both of the engines. They attempted apparently to restart the engines by putting in the fuel, but it just did not happen fast enough because they were not able to achieve the altitude that they needed to achieve, and that is why the plane cut off. Now, according to the report as well, and according to a report in the Economic Times, the aircraft had earlier arrived from Delhi, where it was flight 432, and the previous crew had reported a fault code related stabilizer position sensor. Air India engineers had addressed that issue and cleared the aircraft for its next flight, and the investigation has not linked any connection between that sensor and the crash in any way. The investigation has also not ruled in or ruled out the possibility of crew error, aircraft system malfunction, or design related default. The crew had sufficient rest, like I said, they had cleared their pre-flight checks and they followed all the procedures. However, the investigation is still reviewing the cockpit actions, the system inputs, the procedural adherence in the minutes before the crash. Furthermore, flight data is still under analysis and additional information is being sought right now from Boeing. The aircraft emergency power sequence was fully functional because from the CCTV they were able to establish that the RAT, which is an emergency propeller, was in fact deployed, which means that it was able to auto start and the emergency power systems were working completely, and that was not a problem either. So the question finally boils down to, how did these two levers move out of their position? So apparently, according to aviation experts, only after an aircraft has landed, taxied, parked in its parking bay, do they actually perform a procedure where the fuel is switched off to the engines. It is not done before that. Also, in the procedure of a engine actually failing, according to experts, what they would normally do is they would achieve the altitude they needed to achieve with the one engine that was working, and then conduct a procedure where they would go through a checklist on what was happening with the failed engine. Now, part of that procedure involves switching off fuel and switching it back on again, but the odds of anyone doing it for both engines at the same time are zero, because there is no flight procedure at all that involves that sort of procedure where you switch off both engines at the same time. So it does seem like there's a big question here of what happened in that cockpit, because both of the pilots say that they did not do it, and this was just a few seconds before that plane crashed. So there is, now the further investigation will have to establish how this happened at all. Air India today has said that it's working closely with the regulators and it will cooperate with the ongoing procedure and the investigation. Boeing, in a statement, says that it continues to support the investigation and Air India. There is another question that has arisen as part of this probe in the report that has come out, that back in 2018, the FAA advisory, now the FAA is effectively America's, Federation of Aviation Administration. Apparently, it had issued a special airworthiness information bulletin flagging a potential issue with the fuel control switch locking mechanism on the Boeing aircraft 737 and 787, which, according to that report back in 2018, might disengage without any deliberate pilot action. The bulletin had noted that switches could shift from run to cutoff if the mechanical lock failed or wasn't properly engaged. Now, what had happened after that is, while it was information only, this bulletin, it did not mandate inspections or replacement. And we understand from this report that Air India did not perform the recommended inspections of the aircraft since it was voluntary and not compulsory. That is the one of the key findings that has also come out. So this is what we know so far, that there's this big question of how these two switches went off And if neither of the pilots did it, was there a malfunction in the aircraft? Those are the questions that have not been answered right now. And there are going to be a lot of questions from aviation experts across the world, from family members who have lost their loved ones in that extremely terrible crash, and not just those souls who were on board the aircraft, but those who were on the ground in that medical hostel, young people who lost their lives for absolutely no reason at all. Everyone is going to be looking for answers as to what happened in that cockpit, what happened with that aircraft that costed us these precious lives.